And there we go. Welcome to the Recruiting Insight, the first of our series for Recruiting Insights, and my special guest, Steve Murray. Steve, welcome.
Mark, how are you?
Doing amazing. On behalf of our hardworking and dedicated team here at Recruiting Insight, we want to thank you for being our guest today and all of those joining. This is the first of a series geared toward adding value to the audience, to our broker owner clients and teams, so we can all get better at the talent attraction and retention process.
Well, it's an honor. It's an honor to be here. Honor to be asked. I mean, it's just great. And as you well know, I'm a guy who espouses you can't be successful in the brokerage industry unless you're recruiting effectively. So yeah, it's a good topic area.
It really is. And I think many of the audience already knows who I am. If they don't, I've got 25 years of experience in the industry. I've done recruiting from the highest levels, 50 agents a month, to building a firm from 900 agents to 4,000. My business partner, Ben Hess, I think is listening in. I'm going to put our bios in the chat bar. And Steve, I'm going to put your bio in the chat bar. You've got 46 years of experience in this industry. Senior advisor to Housing Wire Media. I think I read over 4,000 broker assignments that you've done and nearly 1,000 mergers and acquisitions. Is that kind of a ballpark number?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Yeah, so just spending some time with you is just awesome.
Nah.
Now, while we're waiting for folks to come in, because I know we have a lot of people coming in, I'm going to launch a poll of how many years of experience we have in the room today. Stephen, I don't know if you can see that poll.
Yep.
We've got people coming in already. Look at that. We got 20 years or more. Looks like the biggest part of the audience. We are going to be doing Q&A throughout the session. So if you have questions, pop those into the chat bar, or the questions. We'll get to those as we go across. Looks like we have about 80% of the people doing. So I'm going to end this poll and share it.
Okay.
There we go, Steve. So we've got a very experienced audience today.
Yeah.
40% with 20 or more years in the industry.
Yeah.
And look at that, 16 to 20.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And then one more poll here. Let's do your roles. So let's see, do we have, CEOs in the room, broker owners, recruiters, team leaders, brokerage support staff? Maybe you're a supporting vendor that's joining us, or you're not going to tell me, or maybe it's not listed. This will be a fun one, Steve.
Yeah, we'll see what this.
Yeah.
See what this is.
While we're waiting for this poll, I know you're a big fisherman. You got any fishing plans coming up?
Actually, yeah. In about 2 weeks, it'll be my first venture out into a stream in Colorado, about an hour west of here, the North Fork of the South Platte. Beautiful tailwater, great rainbows, some browns. And it's only an hour drive from my house, so.
That's even better.
Yep.
So here we go. We have about 40% of the audience is office managers. We have CEOs and VPs, directors, broker owners, recruiters, team leaders, some support staff. So a great mix of audience today.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to ask Steve, we've never experienced a market, at least that I know of, anything like what we're going through. Multiple interest rate hikes in a 6-month period, declining inventory, institutional investors buying up properties. How do we navigate this?
Well, yes. First of all, it's the fourth downturn in my 46 years. It's not the deepest, but it's the fastest. We've never seen this kind of deceleration from where we were to where we are now. Most forecasters, experts seem to think we're probably at the floor now. I sure hope so, right?
Same.
You know, and we're going to share bits and pieces, some of the parts of research we've done in the past of what brokers did to get through. Particularly, we did some big study on how brokers navigated through the 06 to 2010 downturn, and published it in a white paper called Against All Odds. And we're going to touch on that, I know. But it's kind of like, I remember March the 13th, 2020, when pandemic descended on us and the whole country began to shut down in a matter of days. And I ended up on Zoom calls and phone calls, conference calls with hundreds of brokerage companies. And since I had no idea exactly any more than anybody else did what was going to happen, how long this would go on, the two things I reiterated over and over again: you can only control what you can control. And I suggested to all of my clients and friends that if you thought you were close to your staff and agents, you needed to get far closer. Far closer, in much more frequent contact, because my point was, if you're a little bit nervous or scared, imagine what they feel. And secondly, I said, do whatever you can to preserve cash, right? Defer payables if you can. If you have a credit line, pull the money down. Get it on your side of the table. We're a little, it's still useful to know that today. I mean, we're a little late. We probably should have had this talk last July, which I did with a lot of clients. And it means reducing costs. It means look at everything, and anything you don't have to spend, don't spend it, and preserve cash. And I think those two things are just as important today. And it relates back to our prior research of how did brokers not only get through the 06 to 09 or 10 downturn, how did they actually have more agents, more production when they came out of it? Within a year later? How did they do that? And that's that white paper we wrote called Against All Odds, and where there were about 16 firms that we found that had not, like I said, not only survived, but they actually were bigger and stronger when they came out of it than they had been before.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that. I want to share. I know the Housing Wire group that you're advisor to just acquired Altos Research, and I'm a big fan of Altos.
Yep.
Just going to show the national numbers here of what we're facing, and those listening in, I put a link in the chat bar. You can type in your local city or zip code, and if you're not familiar with Altos, would love you to look at it. Just look at these inventory trends, Steve, on a national basis. This is what we're all facing. This inventory is heading down. We had some hope here. It was heading up. It's coming back down. And what's interesting is this percent of properties with a price decrease. Steve, look at this. These are newly listed properties that list at one price, and then how many have taken a price decrease since that? It's dropping. So some very interesting things going on in the data.
Yep.
Steve, NAR stats kind of historically have told us that 10% of the people kind of leave each year. That's 150,000 people, and then 15% come in. So and then like 25% are switching. So what do we do about all this movement? I mean, how do we, as broker owners and team leaders and managers, how do we even just get a handle on that?
Well, the best, over all my years of working, the best companies, well, little backstop. So everybody on the call, and probably many of the people on here, or some of them, have heard me yak about this before. So I, pardon if I'm boring you with old stories. But the bottom line is this. If you look at the Real Trends 500, which we did last year, and look back 10 years at actually 730 of the top brokers in the country, and we compared their change over the 10 years in agent growth or changes with the change in NAR's membership. Now, the most frightening thing is well over half of those leading large brokerage companies did not grow as much as the NAR numbers grew.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, and there are a lot of them that were barely above. Okay. As we have said, and you've heard me say, there are three things a brokerage has to do to prosper. You have to recruit talent. Second, you have to develop and support that talent. And third, spend less money than you have coming in. It's not complicated what one has to do to succeed in the brokerage business. I didn't say it was easy to execute, but it's not hard to understand what you have to do to succeed. But all our research shows that far too many of the leading firms in the country are mediocre at best in recruiting talent. And since the productivity numbers have declined, flat to declining over the period of time, we'd have to say that far too many of the leading brokers in the country, largest brokers, are mediocre at supporting and developing agents because, Mark, they're experiencing the same turnover you are, that you talked about. Now, most of them are doing okay at number 3 because they're still in business. And since most of these are privately held companies, there's not some inexhaustible supply of capital. They can just keep losing money each year. Ergo, they must be doing okay, making a profit. But the interesting part is most leaders will acknowledge that they understand those fundamentals. But then when you dig in and you say, okay, to an owner operator, or the manager of an office, whatever, you say, okay, we all acknowledge that. And what's our time allocation? And that's when you come to find out that among owner operators of brokerage companies, whether it's 25 agents or 500 agents, the allocation of time to recruiting talent is maybe at best, it's 10 to 15% of their time. And ergo, we wonder why far too many of the largest brokers in the country are not recruiting well. And that also means they're exposed to the next shiny pennies, we call them. Anybody new who succeeds, we always tend to give them a derogatory, rent a desk or Ponzi schemes or all this stuff. Or those are, flat fee, cheap guys. They don't provide any support or service. And we do all that, but what we don't do is learn from them to say, well, if they're growing by recruiting, is it really just about price or is it something else?
Right.
But go back to the key thing. The key thing is most leaders, most owners, most management, they're spending a fraction of their time on the most important function there is, which is recruiting talent. That it comes down.
Yeah, you reminded me of a story. Someone asked me once to pull out my checkbook. I said, "What?" I said, "Let me look at your checkbook." And the point he was trying to make, where I write my checks is what's important to me.
Right.
And what you're saying is pull out your calendar, show me your calendar, and if 10% of your time's in recruiting, well, we know that's your priority, right?
Right.
Yeah.
When we did the study last year, we looked at all those companies, we then ranked them in 3 different categories of growth in agents, growth in transactions, growth in productivity.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked at the top 50 in all 3 categories. So maybe it's a surprise to people on the phone, maybe it isn't. Keller Williams Market Center guy, men and women, were on the growth in agents. They were probably 45% of the top 50 in the country.
Okay.
They were probably around that same percentage in growth and transactions. And of course, everybody goes, yeah, but they're just recruiting bodies.
Right.
Okay, but they recruited bodies and they boosted their production about the same level.
Oh.
Okay. And then explain to me why the number one firm in recruiting agents and the number one firm growth in agents over 10 years and the number one firm in growth and transactions was also number 12. This is among 730 brokerage companies.
Mm-hmm.
Was number 12 in increase in agent productivity. And it was a Keller Williams company.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and not a small one, not somebody who went from 50 agents to 80 agents. No,
Right.
this
Okay.
was
You're talking
enormous growth.
Yeah.
And you talk to the leaders of that company, even the owner, and it's a large brokerage. So this is not a KW person who's an OP or a team leader.
Right.
He owns multiple market centers. And you talk to them and their whole team, and they're spending 50 to 60% of their time on recruiting.
or agent development to help them.
Yeah. 50, 60% or more of their time. Now, I mean, when it comes down to it and all the consulting work I've done, and I've done, I don't know, 250 to 300 on-site assessments of brokerages, where I go and I'm there 2 to 3 days, interview all the top people of the company, interview bunches of agents, and give a report to the owner on how well are they communicating, what are their strengths, where do they have weaknesses, maybe is some assessment on the talent that they have in their company. And I've done all those. How many times I've met with those people, and there's, recruiting is talked about, but the allocation of actual time is just not there.
So I keep hearing, let's look at our calendars and where are we spending our time and helping our
Right.
agents better?
Right.
Retention, right? Productivity and bringing new talent. Steve, I hear a lot about brand and this brand and that brand, and I love all the brands, and brand matters in many ways, like Carpenter Realtors, who we work with in Indy. They have connections, commitment, and community, and they built and lived that brand. But what I hear you talking about is local leadership. And as I recall, part of this study, you did this analysis of profitability and leadership and how these things cut across all brands. How important is local leadership?
It's all that matters. I might as well cut to the chase. We've been looking at the performance of top brokerage companies for 30 years now. And we can look at all the national branded companies as one group versus all the independents and measure relative performance. Mm-hmm. And then we can shuffle the deck again and look at, okay, what about 100% commission concept versus cap company dollar versus graduated commission plan versus flat fee? And again, look at performance. And we've written about this a number of times, and we're very cautious how we say this because of the pride people have in their brand name. But the fact is, while I'm not saying having a good brand name is not important, it is, it's not nearly the most important one. It clearly is not.
It's leadership.
Put another way, as we and again, this is something we've already reported on. So we look back 15 and 20 years, and this is now talking about national companies. And we look at 3 who spend the most on brand advertising over the last 15 and 20 years. And we look at the national companies who spend the least, or none, as the case may be. The 3 who spend the most are down a net 100,000+ agents nationally over the last 15 to 20 years. The two who spend the least are up 170,000 agents.
So you got to say there's something else underneath.
Yeah.
You got, it's like the onion. You got to keep pulling back the onion.
Right.
What's
Right.
attracting those agents or disattracting them?
Right. Listen, the brand name, having a good reputational name in a market is positive.
Yeah.
No question about it. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying it's not the most important factor. The data says when I can control for all the other variables, I mean, again, go back to against all odds. Who made it, not only made it through, but who prospered, right? Well, there were independents, ERA, Century 21, Remax, Coldwell Banker, Keller Williams, Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah, all different.
There were firms of all brands in that group, and they were very large companies or modestly sized companies. They were from Atlanta, Georgia to Peoria, Illinois to Boise, Idaho. I mean, there was no particular rhyme or theory that says this brand did better than that brand, or that style commission plan did better than this style. And what we found when I interviewed the leaders of all those companies, they didn't even know they'd accomplished it until I said, hey, by the way, you're one of only 15 or 16 companies that not only survived, but you grew. And they said, I said, how'd you do it? Every single one in one with specific examples, one way or the other, talked about they got much, much closer to their teams, both their staff and their agents, and really poured their time, attention, and energy into their existing people to take care of them, which led to those people telling their peers and their friends about what we're doing at our company to get through this awful time, which attracted people from other brokerages.
So leadership,
Right.
servant leadership, we want to call it.
Yeah. If you're spending 30 to 40% of your time worrying about your CRM or transaction management platform, you're missing it.
Instead of investing that time in your people development.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's another way. As I just wrote an article that'll be posted next week, I just looked at everybody's earnings. You know, Zillow, Redfin, iPad, all open to all of them. Remax, Anywhere, Berkshire, Keller, every one of them. We looked at all. I have them all sitting
right
over here.
I got the iPad right here.
Yeah, I got them all over here. And I said, well, guess what? All these guys who think they're floating above the residential brokerage industry because they're technology, or they all got their brains kicked in last year, just like most local brokers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, their numbers are bigger. I mean, you know, Redfin lost 360 million. Open Door lost over $1 billion. Okay, guess what? They're in the same business everybody who's on this call is in. And I point out that in my 46 years, here's what hasn't changed. 90% of all transactions involve an agent. Consumers still primarily pick an agent because they know one or someone referred them, 2/3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
The foundation is an agent helping a buyer and seller. Foundation number 2, agents, mostly the top agents in the country, work for a known brokerage company. Many people on here know that Real Trends ranks last year was over 24,000 top individual and teams, 24,000 that did, by the way, 22% of all volume in the industry. This was for 21. We don't have 22s in yet. Do you know that 98% of those 24,000 are with a known brokerage company? Everybody on this call, you're doing something right, because top agents still want to be with a brokerage, whether it's a nationally known or a locally known company. I mean, it's just factual.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do you it kind of like, what are you waiting for? Are you going to be prepared to tell the story of you and your company to other people?
Right.
Are you going to let them see your heart, understand your view? You know, clear back in 06, we studied the top 500 firms. I interviewed 169 agents of the 15 top performing firms from that period of time. And I asked them questions like, why are you with the brokerage you're with? What keeps you there? What do you like there? What do you consider its strongest attributes? How well does your company communicate? And we published a white paper back then called People Still Matter. Because what was interesting, after 169-hour-long interviews, I didn't have 5 of them telling me, oh, the reason I'm here is because of our tech platform, our marketing tools.
Mm-hmm.
They talked about accountability, vision, communication, and community. Those were the things they talked about. Why are you there? Well, I trust my manager. I really respect the owner. And on and on and on and on. I mean, they literally all said, as far as tech and marketing and, you know, things like that, they said that's kind of a given. That they're, you know, a lot of good brokers have all that stuff. That's not what will cause me to be there or be here.
Right.
Yeah, just.
So we have a question from the audience. Someone saying, well, hey, Mark and Steve, you guys said I should devote more time to recruiting, maybe up to 50% of my time. Well, how do I do that? And, you know, I could probably talk for hours on this because it's my passion. I'm going to type in the Q&A where you can book a consult and we can do a more in-depth discussion on that. But Steve, do you have thoughts on how they can, by design and by intention, switch the amount of time that they're devoting to these activities?
I've worked with clients on this. The first thing you have to do is take a 2-week period, look back 2 weeks. Where did you spend your time? First, know thyself. Where did you put your time? And by the way, when I was still owning and running Real Trends, I had to do this for myself. Every 3 to 6 months, I'd sit and go, look at my calendar. Where did I spend my time? In the last 2 weeks or 3 or whatever. Just look at it. Where did all my time go? And you realize that you had all kinds of time dealing with, pardon my saying this, minutia.
Mm-hmm.
And once you see that, you could say, well, if I got to have more time for recruiting and developing people, what do I need? What do I have to offload? Or, hey, it could be you're a small firm and you're still listing and selling. And of course, that's a different discussion, which is, well, do you want a brokerage or do you want to list and sell?
How do you get out of production?
And get out of production. But you literally, the best thing to do is look at your last 2-3 weeks. Where did you spend all your time? And
Steve,
then say, what can I stop doing?
It's the same thing that, for those of you listening in, when we coach our agents about hiring their first assistant, when they hire their first assistant, their production doubles, but they do the 2-week exercise of where are they spending all their time and what they can automate, delegate, or eliminate.
Right.
So maybe comment on that, because I know you and I think a lot alike.
Well,
what can we delegate? What can we eliminate?
I don't know how much more to add to what you just said and what we've just commented on. It just depends on, now look, I also understand, and I've had many clients who their person is not really good at, they've managed to build a reasonable sized brokerage company, even though they don't like to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't feel like they've got the personality to do it. And they'd rather be focused on other business things. Great, it's fine. But as long as you understand, then you need to find someone.
Delegate.
You need to delegate. You need to find somebody that's going to do this.
Yeah.
Years ago, I met with a client, six offices, about 140 agents, and they had a lot of capacity to grow. And I sat with the leadership team without the owner there, and I said, let's set a goal. I said, I'm going to set a goal. Let's agree to a goal. I asked a question. I said, for these 6 managers, I said, is it safe to say that you know personally 10 good agents in your community that you'd like to have with your firm? And they all said,
Yes.
yeah. I said, great. Second question, when was the last time you had say an hour of personal time, cup of coffee, lunch, glass of wine, something, a walk in the park? And they all admitted they hadn't, for 6 months or more, hadn't seen those people. I said, all right, so here's our goal. Pardon me, get this turned down. I said, well, can we set I went for the goal. 2 months, within 2 months from right now, you have had that appointment with each one of those 10. Well, they about freaked out because they were so busy. We negotiated to 90 days, 3 months to have 10 appointments, to get 10 appointments set. And, I did a follow-up with them. Only one of the 6 even made it within 90 days. They had all the reasons in the world. They didn't do it. They did. It's okay. And that firm today is actually smaller than it was. And this is probably 8-9 years ago. It's smaller than it was. It's endemic in our industry. For some reason, people are afraid. I don't want to use other terms. They're afraid to meet with somebody they know, to say, and have an idea in mind, that conversation. I think one of my clients, who's pretty doggone good at it, said, when I go to meet with a candidate, I will always just talk. The first conversation is just getting to know each other, just talking about family and business and life and vacations. And they said, we'll always end the discussion by saying, this guy would say, I'd always tell people, look, I know you're happy where you are because you're a good business person, and you wouldn't be there if it wasn't working for you. But should the circumstances ever change, would you at least give me a chance to talk to you? That's the script.
That's it. Yeah.
And once he got that script, then he was totally comfortable seeing anyone, because he could, and he tends to be a quieter guy than normal, but he said, I love asking questions and getting to know people. And that was his effective way. It wasn't going in and sitting down and saying, I'm here to recruit you. Go ahead and try that.
Yeah, not going to work too well.
No.
I'm going to do a little bit of a selfless plug here. We have a 12-week curriculum where we teach people some of these concepts. And so if you're interested in that, at the end, I'm going to give you a way to book a consult with us. But Steve,
well, I mean, and here's the thing, by the way, right, which is important, that people at least listen to what you and your firm have to offer, because here's the other thing. Okay, so I'm going to allocate 6% of my time to recruiting. How should I allocate it? Right, and you have solutions to that. In talking to clients, I say, well, do you think that Keller Williams went from 106,000 to 170,000 agents just wandering around?
No.
Do you think that EXP went from 6,000 to 86,000 without a plan?
No.
A recruiting plan and system and scripts? So, trust me, they would never have gotten there.
It was by design, not by default. And
That's
we
right.
have a 12-week program by design.
But it's also important, when I said earlier, get closer to your people. Shifting gears a little bit, one of the top people, I remember he had me almost in tears. He clearly was in tears. he talked about in the downturn, 07, 08 in the pits. He said, and he had about, I think he had 15 employees and 200 agents, give or take. And he said, one day I just froze. I had no idea what I was going to do to survive. I was at a loss. And he said, I brought 4 or 5 of my top people in, employees. And he told them, I don't know what to do. I'm out of answers. And he told me that in an interesting way, they all told him, we were waiting for you to ask for help.
Mhm.
We're all in this together. Let's get a team effort together to do this. And he said, it was the turning point of my business career. When I realized, as the 100% owner of the brokerage did not mean I had to be alone. And from that point, and by the way, this was a traditional type company. I had the same discussions, a little bit different, from 2 other companies that said we invited our key people in to engage with each other and trust each other and open up to each other about our fears and our concerns and what do we do. And now it became us, not me.
Oh, I love it.
Navigating a way through this. He said he was in tears over the phone. And today he has, by the way, last I checked, I think he's got 450 agents now. He's just kept going.
What you're really describing is a component of what I call servant leadership.
Right. Yeah. It's
Well,
so getting close to agents and recruiting is one part of it, clearly, but again, going back to the pandemic times, it was really interesting that over the next 9 months after the pandemic, per agent productivity for a whole lot of brokerage companies went through the roof. Now, keep in mind, this is 2020, not 21, when things got really kind of crazy, right? And I said, I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that almost all these firms were doing several times a week Zoom educational and informational opportunities for the agents and staff of their companies. And they kept that going for 4, 5, 6 months till everybody got Zoom fatigue, right, as we called it. But I said, do you think there's any possible correlation that you were actually in communication with your people frequently?
more often, more
Yep.
value added.
Yep.
There was a direct correlation.
I'm just guessing, but I didn't see much else changing.
No, it was more connection, more communication, more.
Yeah.
Now, Steve, I'd like to work in a little bit, and we've still got some time here. Teams, the importance of teams. Some of the brokers listening in love teams. Some of them maybe are team friendly. Some aren't. But teams are taking a larger and larger share of the closed transactions, are they not?
Yes, clearly. The number of teams on our rankings and the average production of those teams have both skyrocketed in the last 5 years.
Yeah. Is valuing a brokerage different than valuing a team, and do teams have value?
Yes. To answer your question, we use as a basis, we use the same basis for both, which is, if you will, profitability is the most important criteria for the value of a brokerage or a team. Brokerages are higher or are valued, generally speaking, at higher multiples of profit than teams are. Why? Because most of the teams, and we'll do 25 to 35 valuations of teams a year and 150 to 180 brokerage companies, roughly, what we do in a year here at Real Trends Consulting. Teams still, one of two things is still present in most of them. either one, still a huge part of the business is the team owner's sphere of influence business. It's personal. Or number two, maybe that's a little lower, but the leader is doing most of the listings and or sales, but particularly listings. So this is a team, they could be doing $1.5 million gross commission income, but the owner of the team is still has their hand on 50 to 70% of the business.
Is there a sweet spot of what that should be?
Well, if I were trying to build a team that would have value, it would be 10% personal and 90% other lead generation. And I wouldn't be listing or selling at all. If I'm trying to maximize the value of a team, as we say, the least valuable you are to the sales, the more valuable the team is.
So you have a real business then.
You have a business, and you know, and this is a true story, but I represented a husband and wife who had built a 12, 14 person team doing 2 million gross commission income. And I worked with them, did the valuation. They had some internal people that were interested in buying it, but they were uncertain whether the team could really prosper without the husband-wife founders. So the husband, I'm going to shorten this up. The husband-wife founders said, well, how do we establish that the thing will be fine without us? And I kiddingly said, we'll disappear for 6 months to a year. And they said, really? I said, yeah, leave. Turn it over, and let those guys run it. Well, little did I know that, 10 months later, I get a call from the husband. He said, well, we did what you said. We jumped in a motorhome and we've been gone for 8 months, 10 months. We checked in about once a week, make sure things were fine, but we didn't touch anything. I said, how'd the business do? He said, still hitting on all cylinders. I said, now how do those people feel about paying you a 7-figure sum of money for your team? He said, they're fine. I said, of course they are, because they realize, now the danger is they find out they don't need you. They may decide they don't need you.
Right.
But there were enough controls. But would your business, ask yourself the question, if you took 3 months off, never called in, would your team still be there? By the way, the same question of a brokerage company.
Well, could your business, does it have sustainability, and would it?
Right.
Steve, what do most owners, broker owners, business owners, what do they miss when thinking about their company and creating the most value from a M&A perspective, making their enterprise the most valuable it can be? What do we miss typically?
Well, I'll talk about the high level things. There's a bunch of things under the hood, so to speak. But high level is what we just talked about. Can your business, can it still do well without you? I mean, that's a business I'm pretty comfortable paying for. Right. I mean, that's a big part of it. And the other part I already said also, profitability. I mean, are you running it consistently profitable? Are you growing at least a little? You don't have to grow 20% a year, 10% a year. As long as you're growing steadily and you're profitable, you're going to have a value. So those two things, just those two things. Did you build a team that can run the business, that it operates if you're not there? And number two, is it profitable? And are you generally growing that profitability?
Wow.
That's it.
Well,
now, there's a lot of other stuff in the salad, so to speak, but those are the two most important things.
Steve, I'm going to launch a poll because this is going to be a series that we do, and the poll should be up. And we're going to open it up to Q&A for anyone in the audience. But I'd like you to participate in a poll for future topics. Like, Steve, one of the ones you mentioned is working myself out of production.
Right. It's by the way, on that one, please, everybody who's on here, I'm not suggesting that is easy. It is not. It's frightening in some regards. It's got risk to it. But if you want to build a brokerage with value and you're still enlisting in production, you're not going to get there. Any more than a team that gets a great team built, but is still 60% the owner of the team. You're not really creating a lot of value that someone else is going to invest in.
And that could be like Steve, you and I know we've worked with broker owners who own a franchise office.
Yep.
But they're the number one producer in the office.
Yeah.
So they're really a team. They don't call themselves a team.
Yeah. And hey, I have counseled a lot of teams. They'll go, well, what am I supposed to do? And I said, most teams, I mean, we own companies for you get three things out of ownership. You get the right to equity appreciation value, you get the right to grow your income, and you get the right to vote, which I also call the personal satisfaction quotient, right? So I've counseled a lot of teams. And I said, look, the way you got your team built, it's generating tons of income, right? And I said, right. I said, don't look for equity value. That's not how you built your team. It's not, equity is not going to be your answer. Take that income that's being generated and invest it outside of the team. Take your pick, real estate, stocks, bonds, gold, silver, Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. Whatever take the cash flows, invest it outside, and understand that that's the best way for you to create equity value, but it's equity outside of the team. Because everybody talks about a big market for teams, and years ago I thought there was going to be, but with few exceptions, it's still so many teams that's still tied to the leader.
To the high production. Here's the poll. I don't know if you can see it, Steve. The looks like the number one topic is best practices recruiting and retention.
Right.
Followed by the psychology of recruiting. My partner Ben Hess is an expert master at that. We could have him on. Teams, how best to support and enable teams. It was a big one. Retention and PPP. So we're going to build topics. I have friends like Steve Murray all over the industry. We're going to bring some experts in to talk about these topics and do these more often to add value to this.
Wait a minute, you have other friends?
Well,
I thought I was your friend.
I got a few.
No, and you asked me a question a while ago about teams. The first thing I tell my clients who are broker owners about teams is, I can't tell you about the particular competitive mix of threats and firms in your market, but I always advise owners, for whatever reasons you think, first decide whether you want to have an environment that totally supports teams in your company or you don't. Don't get caught in the middle where you like them, but you don't really like them. Like you just wish they'd go away, or you wish they'd stop wanting this and this and this. You make a decision. I want to have teams because, and therefore I'm going to build that to support them wholly without reservation. And I have clients that go, we don't allow teams. We allow at most two related individuals to work together, but we're not a brokerage that is going to have teams of 6, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 people. It doesn't fit with our culture.
Not their model, not their culture. And
That's
if it's by design, that's great.
That's fine. I know highly successful brokers doing it both ways.
Both ways.
Both ways.
Well,
just don't get stuck in the middle.
We're going to open it up for some Q&A. Thomas is asking, I'm open to having teams, but like to have one set of structure for all teams. Is that a bad idea? And what's the best model? I'd love to do a one-on-one with you. I don't know that we can address that.
I will leave that to Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, it's really what Steve, you just mentioned. It's by design. You're the leader. You've got to decide what your niche is, what your specialty, what you can support. And if that's what you want to build, but would love to talk with you, and you can reach out to us. I'd love to talk to you separately on that. Steve, how do people get a hold of you if they'd like to talk about evaluations or that kind of?
Let me give everybody two contact. My email is smurray, M-U-R-R-A-Y, @realtrends.com. Or I love talking to you. So 303-741-1000. And there's just two of us now at Real Trends Consulting, Scott and myself. So you'll get us.
There you go. Well, and for us at Recruiting Insight, we really have three industry leading solutions. Our third pool solutions for new agents, our co-recruit solutions for experienced agents, and one, Steve, we're really excited that we're going to be announcing and launching on Monday, the team hiring place, which is just in time hiring for team leaders. And if you'd like to learn more about that, I'm going to put in the chat bar how you can schedule.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, as we wrap up, I want to thank everyone who attended. We had well over 175 broker owners and team leaders participate, and the feedback has been really great. I apologize, our chat room was disabled, but the Q&A room is open. So if there's any last minute questions before we wrap up, pop those in, and you can reach out to Steve and myself and our teams, and we'd love to help you get, achieve your goals. Steve, any last words of wisdom?
No, I just, it's my prayer that everyone focuses on getting through this year, basically. We're not likely to have a big recovery this year from where we are, with mortgage rates rising again and likely to stay high. But the last downturn took out 25% of the Real Trends 500, didn't make it through. Don't be one of those people. And we tell people, you have my contact. If you think that Scott or I can be of help, don't hesitate to call. As we like to say, the first consult call is free. So don't hesitate to call us if we can help, point you in a direction for resources. I mean, we don't have all the answers, but we generally know people who do have answers.
And same here. We don't want you to be one of those 25%. Let's be on the other side, and we're all in it together. What a great industry. We're privileged to be just amazing people and agents. So Steve, I can't thank you so much for being the first guest on the Recruiting Insight Mastermind.